So normally what you would do is the next step would be to add a new layer, title this layer Actions, and start typing some code on it to make the magic happen. But we don't have to do that anymore, because when we use snippets with Flash, it will automatically add an Actions layer for us as it puts the code onto our document. So I have my button triangle, my button that is set to navigate me to my third section in my project, which happens to begin at frame number 51 in mine. Yours will begin at whatever frame you have set up. So with this button active, if I go to my code snippets, which I can go find under Window, somewhere. Oh, here it is up here, Window Code Snippets. Otherwise, it's this icon on the side where you have two curly braces on top of what looks to be a page. So I click on that. Tooltip tells me it's Code Snippets. And up come my code snippets. Now we can see that there are a number of snippets available to us, and we will explore a variety of these in class today. Timeline navigation is the one I want, because when I click on this third button, I want to have my project jump to frame number 51. So I will twirl down the folder for timeline navigation. Now I'm going to click off quickly. This button is active. It's important you have one of your buttons selected. And also you should mentally know where you want that button to go. I click on Code Snippets, go to Timeline Navigation, and now if I read through the options, I can see, let's see, click and go to Frame and Play. That sounds kind of what I want, which is I want to click on this button and go to a frame and start playing my movie at that point. So if I double click, there, it pulled up my Actions window. And I'm going to make my Actions window bigger. And the code that shows up here in my Actions window in gray are comments. Comments give you instructions of how to do it, or how to work with it. And it's only the code in black or in blue, or what will also be green in certain cases. That's the only code you need to worry about, and generally the only code you will ever have to change is code that shows up in black. Now if we look on here, we will see that it has in the code the instance name of my button symbol, and then it has a bunch of stuff. And if I read line number 7, it says instructions. Replace the number 5 in the code with the frame number you would like the playhead to move to when the symbol instance is clicked. So it's telling me exactly what's going to happen. Change the number 5 to the frame I want. Well, in this case, I remember for my example, I wanted it to go to frame 51. So I just add a 1 there. I'm done. Now I can save. I can test my movie, and I will see it comes up. And now I'm going to wait till I'm back at the beginning. If I click on this button, it automatically jumped to frame 51. So every time I keep clicking, it's jumping to that frame. So it really was as simple as selecting the object, pulling up the snippets, double-clicking on the snippet I wanted, and then changing the number to go to the frame I wanted it to go to. So I can now repeat that for my other buttons. So my circle button, I want it to go to frame number 25. So I click my circle button, click Code Snippets, double click Go to Frame and Play, and nothing happened. Let's try again. Click Snippets, go to, okay, here we go. Now we have button circle. This time we know it's going to frame 25. Now I can repeat that again with my starting button, which I know will go to frame 1. Snippets, go to Frame and Play, and this time change it to 1. So now if I test my movie, I can keep sending it back to frame 1. I can send it to frame 25, frame 1, or frame 51. All right. So now with my buttons on the stage, to give each one of these a unique identifier, I click on the object. I look at the properties palette or properties window on the right hand side of the screen, and we can see at the top where it refers to instance name. It says this object is an instance of my button, and it's now waiting for an instance name. And I am now going to type in an instance name here, and I will just call this one button square. And I'm calling it button square because it's going to allow me to play this first section in my project where I have the square animating. Now it's important when you are typing in instance names that you begin with a letter and you use no spaces or funny characters, no apostrophes, no any. You're only allowed to use letters, numbers, hyphen, and no, actually hyphen I think is forbidden as well. Letters, numbers, and underscore. That's it. No spaces. If you put in spaces, it will break. So don't do that. So now my next segment will be my circle. So if I go to my second button on screen, I'm going to refer to this as button circle. And my third button on screen I will refer to as button triangle. So my objects now have unique identifiers associated with them. So they're all an instance or a copy of my button, but each one has a unique identifier, instance name, or think of like a automobile, a VIN number, vehicle identification number. Okay, so it was discovered at the end of the last recording that I screwed up. It happens. I'd like to say, well, you know, I'm not proud and I screwed up. No, it's not that kind of screw up. It's just that I forgot that using snippets, Flash introduces new keyframes and will put a keyframe to put the code at whatever frame I am currently on. So if I am on frame 51, like on the previous one I was somewhere in the 40s, it inserted code, a keyframe at frame 49. So that's, or frame number 50. So that's not what I want. I want to have my code for the buttons available through the duration of my project. So I click at frame 1, and I'm going to click on one of my buttons, and then I am going to double click on, or click on code snippets and say go to frame and play. And now I can say I want this one to go to frame 1 because this is my square and I want it to go to frame 1. Now while I'm still making sure the playback head is not on frame 25, 35, or 2, but still on frame 1, I click on my next button. I go to my snippet, go to and play. This time I know I want it to go to frame 25. And now we can see that the code as it's showing up is only occurring or appearing on that first frame, signified by the letter A on that keyframe. I go to my third button, snippets, go to and play, and this time I will change it to 51. So now I have my code for all three buttons, and we can see that it works no matter where I am, because once the code is in memory, Flash is like an elephant, it doesn't forget, so it's able to keep accessing it. So even though I don't see any more keyframes, that as long as I put the code in memory, Flash is going to remember it for the rest of my project. If a button is only showing up at a specific part or point in time, then I need code to only show up at that point. So I would insert a new keyframe and add my code for it at that juncture. So now we have a project that is working. Alright, so to put in my stop, I need to make sure my playback head is at the frame I want to do it. And then I go into my snippets, and we have these cool tool tips that show up in the snippet that tells me what will happen. So let's see, stop at this frame makes sense. The flash timeline will stop pause at the frame where you insert this code. Exactly what I want to have happen. So if I double click on that, it puts it in, and we can see that the code for a stop is ridiculously simple compared to the other code. Stop, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, semicolon. When you are working in ActionScript, the semicolon is like the period at the end of a sentence. It is telling Flash that I am done with this line of code. That's what the semicolon does. It's important to grow accustomed to the punctuation because ActionScript is extremely sensitive. You can't use a colon in place of a semicolon. If it requires a period and you put in a colon or a semicolon, if you punctuate incorrectly, it grows extremely unhappy with you and your code will fail and you'll be like, why is it not making sense? Go check your punctuation, that you use the correct punctuation in the correct place, and then all will be right with the universe. So I put in a stop so I can test my movie and see that now it's now waiting for something to happen. So if I push the first button, it plays, and it will play through its entirety, and it gets back to frame 1 because the Swift file will loop, and now it's waiting for me to click the button again. Now I can click on the triangle one, and it goes back to frame 1. So now that we've accomplished that, we can also insert stops for the other two animations as well. So at the end of the first animation, I am going to scrub my playback head to the start of the second one, and now I can go into my snippets and say stop at this frame. Okay, it should. It should have put a stop in. Click, snips. Alright, there we go. I had to click on the actions layer so it knew it was active. Go to my third one, click in the actions layer, click on my snippets, stop at this frame, and now play through and it stops. But I think I want to adjust it so that it stops at the end of each animation without playing the next animation. So I can click on that frame, pull it back 1. Click on that frame, pull it back 1. Try again. And at the very end of my project, go to my snips, put in a stop, and it's there. So now if I test my project, click on the triangle, it plays through and stops. Plays through and stops, but it's not. So we can see now the project is working.